At my sister's wedding, my seat, outside, near the coat racks. She smirked. Guess you don't count. I grabbed my gift, stood up, and left. Then the truth came out. She went pale. Before we continue, I would like to ask you to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment about where you are watching from. Let's go back to where it all began. I never expected my own sister's wedding to feel like a battlefield. But there I was, standing at the entrance of the grand ballroom at the Ritz, invitation card clutched in my trembling hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. "Ms. Ava Rivers, let me show you to your table," the wedding coordinator said, her perfect smile never faltering as she led me through the magnificent hall adorned with cascading white orchids and twinkling fairy lights. Followed her, expecting to join the other guests at the beautifully decorated tables I could see ahead. The centerpieces were stunning, crystal vases filled with peonies and roses, exactly the flowers Amelia had always dreamed of having at her wedding since we were little girls, playing make-believe in our backyard. But we kept walking, past all those tables, past the dance floor, past the gift table piled high with expensive presents wrapped in silver and white. We kept going until we reached a small alcove near the exit doors, where the coat racks stood like sentinels guarding the boundary between celebration and afterthought. "Here we are," she said cheerfully, gesturing to a small, round table positioned awkwardly between the bathrooms and the coat check. A single place card with my name sat there, looking lonely against the white tablecloth. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I'm the bride's sister." The coordinator checked her tablet, scrolling through the seating chart with perfectly manicured nails. "No mistake, Ms. Rivers. This is your assigned seat. The seating arrangement was approved by the bride personally." My cheeks burned as I nodded and thanked her. She walked away, already speaking into her headset about champagne flutes and the timing of the first toast. I sat down in my isolated corner, watching as the ballroom filled with guests who were guided to tables in the main area. From my vantage point, I could see everything. Amelia's college friends being seated at a prominent table near the front. Our distant cousins, who she barely knew, positioned closer to the head table than I was. Even my mother's hairdresser had a better seat than me. The message couldn't have been clearer if Amelia had hired a skywriter. "You don't belong here." I pulled out my compact mirror, checking my appearance. Had I done something wrong with my outfit? My navy blue dress was elegant but understated, exactly what Amelia had requested for non-bridal party family. My makeup was flawless, my hair styled in loose waves that had taken an hour to perfect this morning. No, this wasn't about how I looked. This was about putting me in my place. A waiter approached, offering champagne. I took 2 glasses, downing the first one immediately. The bubbles burned my throat, but the alcohol did nothing to numb the humiliation I felt. Rough spot, huh? A middle-aged man at the table next to mine, also near the coat racks, raised his glass in solidarity. "I'm the groom's ex-stepfather. You?" "Bride's only sister," I replied. His eyebrows shot up. "Ouch." "Yeah," I said, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. Ouch is right. The wedding march began to play, and everyone stood, turning toward the entrance. I remained seated for a moment longer, gathering my strength before rising to watch my perfect sister walk down the aisle toward her perfect life, while I was tucked away like an embarrassing secret. As Amelia appeared in her designer gown that probably cost more than my yearly salary, tears glistening in her eyes as she clutched our father's arm, I felt a strange mix of love and resentment wash over me. The guests collectively gasped at her beauty, and I couldn't deny she looked stunning. Like a princess from a fairy tale, floating down the aisle on a cloud of tulle and dreams. But as I stood there, watching from my distant corner, I realized something I'd been denying for years. In my sister's fairy tale, I wasn't the supportive sister character. I wasn't even a minor character with a few speaking lines. In Amelia's story, I was barely an extra, someone to be placed out of sight, near the coat racks, where I wouldn't ruin her perfect tableau. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. This wasn't a new revelation. It was just the most public confirmation of what I'd always known but tried to ignore. In the hierarchy of our family, I had always been an afterthought. The ceremony proceeded with picture-perfect precision. Vows were exchanged, rings were placed on fingers, and kisses were shared to thunderous applause. I clapped along with everyone else, my smile firmly in place, determined not to let anyone see how much this hurt. When it was over and the celebration began, I decided I had two choices. I could slink away, nursing my wounds in private, or I could confront this situation head-on. Maybe it was the champagne, or maybe it was years of suppressed feelings finally breaking through, but I chose the latter. It was time to have a chat with my dear sister and mother about my seat assignment. After all, what did I have to lose? My dignity was already hanging on the coat rack beside someone's mink stole. I weaved through the crowd as the reception kicked into full swing, dodging waiters with trays of hors d'oeuvres and guests already tipsy from the open bar. My mother was holding court near the head table, surrounded by her friends who were cooing over Amelia's dress and the extravagant flower arrangements. "Mom, can I talk to you for a minute?" I touched her elbow gently, trying to pull her aside, without making a scene. She turned, her perfectly made-up face lighting up with a practiced smile. "Ava, darling, isn't this just magnificent? Your sister looks absolutely radiant." "Yes, she does," I agreed, because it was true. "But I need to talk to you about something." Her smile dimmed slightly as her friends pretended not to listen while leaning in closer. "Can it wait, dear? We're in the middle of celebrating." "It's about my seating assignment," I pressed on, lowering my voice. "I'm all the way in the back, next to the coat check. Was that some kind of mistake?" My mother's expression shifted subtly, her eyes hardening even as her smile remained fixed in place. "Oh, Ava, don't be so dramatic. It's just a seat." "Mom, I'm sitting next to the bathrooms. Every guest who needs to pee has to walk past me. I'm your daughter and Amelia's only sister." She patted my hand condescendingly. "Honey, these things are complicated. The venue has space constraints, and Amelia had to make some tough decisions with the seating chart. You know how these things go." "Space constraints?" I echoed, glancing around the massive ballroom. "There are at least 300 people here, and somehow I'm the only immediate family member relegated to Siberia?" My mother's smile tightened. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill. This is Amelia's special day. Please don't ruin it with your sensitivities." The way she said sensitivities made it sound like a disease. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "I'm not trying to ruin anything. I just want to understand why I'm being treated like a distant acquaintance at my own sister's wedding." "You always do this," she sighed, glancing around to make sure no one important was watching our exchange. "You always find some way to make things about you. Can't you just be happy for your sister without creating drama?" Before I could respond, she was pulled away by the wedding planner who needed her approval on something. She seemed almost relieved for the escape, giving me a quick, "We'll talk later, dear," before disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, feeling like I'd been slapped. Was I being oversensitive? Was I making drama out of nothing? The doubts crept in, as they always did, when my mother dismissed my feelings. But no, this wasn't nothing. This was a calculated exclusion, and I needed to hear it from Amelia herself. I found my sister in a quiet corner, having a moment alone with a glass of champagne before rejoining her guests. She looked ethereal in her designer gown, her makeup still perfect despite the emotional ceremony. "Amelia, congratulations," I said, approaching her with a genuine smile. Despite everything, I was happy for her. The ceremony was beautiful. Ava, she exclaimed, pulling me into a careful hug that wouldn't wrinkle her dress. I'm so glad you could make it. Of course I made it. I wouldn't miss my only sister's wedding. I paused, then decided to just come out with it. I wanted to ask you about my seat assignment. Was there some kind of mix-up? Amelia's face went through a series of expressions. Surprise, then confusion, then something that looked almost like guilt, before settling on innocence. What do you mean? I'm sitting at the very back, next to the coat check. Away from the high family, away from, well, everyone. Oh. She blinked rapidly. I had no idea. The wedding planner handled all of that. There must have been some mistake. The lie was so smooth, I almost believed it. Almost. Really? Mom just told me you had to make some tough decisions because of space constraints. Amelia's perfect composure flickered for just a second. Well, yes, there were some challenges with the layout, but I certainly didn't intend for you to feel excluded. But you did know where I was seated. She took a sip of champagne, buying herself time. It's a big wedding, Ava. I couldn't micromanage every detail. Your wedding planner just told me that you personally approved the seating chart. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you really doing this right now? On my wedding day? And there it was, the classic deflection. Make me the villain for daring to question the slight. I'm not trying to ruin your day, I said quietly. I just want to understand why my own sister would stick me in the back corner like an embarrassing relative no one wants to talk to. You know what your problem is, Ava? Amelia's voice was honey-sweet, but her eyes were cold. You always think people are out to get you. Maybe if you weren't so negative all the time, you'd be easier to include in things. The words hit me like ice water. This wasn't just about a seat. This was about a lifetime of being made to feel like I was the problem. So you admit it was deliberate? I didn't say that, she backtracked, glancing around to make sure no one was watching our exchange. Look, can we not do this right now? It's my wedding day, for God's sake. Can't you just be happy for me for once instead of making everything about you? It was eerie how closely her words echoed our mother's. The same playbook, the same tactics. Make me feel selfish for having feelings, for noticing when I was being pushed aside. You know what? You're right, I said, surprising her with my sudden capitulation. Today is your day. Congratulations again. I walked away before she could respond, before the tears threatening to spill could betray me. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. As I made my way back to my isolated table, a memory surfaced. Something I hadn't thought about in years. A moment that, in retrospect, should have told me everything I needed to know about my place in the family. A revelation that would explain why I was sitting near the coat racks instead of with my family on this supposedly joyous occasion. I sank back into my chair at the lonely table, the memory washing over me with startling clarity. It had happened 6 years ago, when I was home from college for the holidays. I'd been looking for an old photo album in my mother's study, wanting to reminisce about childhood Christmas celebrations for a project I was working on. What I found instead changed everything. The bookshelf in my mother's study had always been meticulously organized. Family photo albums arranged chronologically, leather-bound classics she'd never read but liked to display, and a row of matching journals she'd kept over the years. I'd never paid much attention to those journals before, assuming they were filled with mundane daily entries or perhaps notes from her various charity committee meetings. But that day, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled one out, noticing the year marked on its spine, 2003, when I was 13 and Amelia was 15. I opened it, expecting to find shopping lists or appointment reminders. Instead, I found a detailed chronicle of my sister's life. Amelia got an A on her history presentation today, one entry read. Her teacher said she has a natural talent for public speaking. We celebrated with ice cream at Barton's. I flipped through more pages, memories of that year coming back to me as I read. Amelia placed second in the regional debate championship. She was disappointed not to win, but I reminded her that silver is still an achievement. Bought her that bracelet she's been eyeing. Amelia's first high school dance tonight. She looked absolutely beautiful in her blue dress. Henry took dozens of photos. She's growing up so fast. Each page contained loving observations, proud moments, small disappointments, and celebrations, all centered around Amelia. My mother had recorded every detail of my sister's adolescence with the devotion of a biographer documenting a beloved subject. Curious now, I pulled out another journal, 2001, and found the same pattern, and another from 2008, when I'd graduated high school with honors. Nothing about that achievement was mentioned, though there were 3 pages dedicated to Amelia's college acceptance letters. My hands trembling slightly, I systematically went through every journal on that shelf. 15 years of my mother's, thoughts and observations, spanning from when Amelia was 5 years old to her college graduation. I searched for my name, mentions of my achievements, my struggles, my milestones. I looked for any evidence that my mother had noticed me growing up alongside my sister. I found almost nothing. I was a footnote in Amelia's biography. Ava had another one of her moods today. Had to cut our shopping trip short. Or Ava needs braces. Appointment next Thursday at 4. Practical notes, administrative details, no pride, no celebration, no loving observations of who I was becoming. It was as if I had been a houseplant that needed occasional watering rather than a daughter deserving of the same attention lavished on my sister. I remember sitting there on the floor of my mother's study, surrounded by the physical evidence of my lifelong invisibility, feeling something inside me crack and shift. It wasn't just that my mother preferred Amelia. I'd always known that on some level. It was the sheer thoroughness of her devotion to one daughter and her indifference to the other. When my mother found me there, journals scattered around me, she didn't apologize. She didn't try to explain. She simply said, "Those are private, Ava," and began collecting them, returning them to their proper places on the shelf. "Why?" I'd asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why is there nothing about me?" She'd looked, genuinely confused. "What do you mean? Of course there are things about you." "Show me," I challenged her. "Show me one entry where you wrote about me the way you write about Amelia. One entry where you seemed proud of me or interested in who I am." She couldn't. Instead, she'd bristled defensively. "I can't believe you're going through my private journals and then complaining about the content. This is exactly the kind of behavior that makes it difficult to..." She'd stopped herself, but I heard the unspoken end of that sentence. "Makes it difficult to love you the way I love her." "Difficult to what, Mom?" I pressed, needing to hear it. "Nothing," she said, straightening the journals with military precision. "This conversation is over. Please respect my privacy in the future." I never brought it up again. What would have been the point? You can't force someone to love you the way you need to be loved. You can't make someone see you if they've spent a lifetime looking past you. Sitting at my isolated table at Amelia's wedding, that memory gave a new context to my seat assignment. This wasn't just a slight. It was a continuation of a pattern established long ago. In the story of our family, I had always been placed in the margins, just out of frame in the official portrait. I was startled out of my reverie by someone pulling out the chair beside me. I looked up, expecting to see the ex-stepfather who'd commiserated with me earlier, but instead found myself face to face with James, Amelia's brand new husband. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" he asked, loosening his bow tie slightly. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, but there was something troubled in his eyes. I could use a break from the spotlight. "Of course," I said, surprised. "Though I should warn you, this table has been designated as the family outcast zone. Sitting here might be socially risky." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I noticed you were isolated back here. It seemed unusual." I shrugged, trying to appear more nonchalant than I felt. That's family politics for you. James nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip from his champagne flute. Amelia can be particular about how she wants things. Something in his tone made me look at him more closely. For a man who had just married the supposed love of his life, he didn't seem particularly elated. In fact, he seemed almost worried. Everything okay? I asked cautiously. You know, besides the normal wedding day jitters. He hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was within earshot. Can I confide in you about something? I know we don't know each other well, but you're her sister. You might understand. I felt a chill run down my spine. Whatever he was about to say, I sensed it would change everything. Of course, I said, leaning in slightly. The music was loud enough to cover our conversation, but I still felt like we were conspiring. What's on your mind? James twisted his new wedding band nervously. Have you ever had that feeling where you're absolutely certain about something, and then suddenly, you're not? I laughed softly. Only about every major decision I've ever made. I love Amelia, he said quickly, as if needing to establish that fact before proceeding. She's beautiful, ambitious, charming when she wants to be. But? I prompted when he trailed off. He sighed deeply. But I've been seeing sides of her recently that concern me. The way she talks about people when they're not around. The way she manipulates situations to get what she wants. I remained silent, not wanting to influence his confession with my own complicated feelings about my sister. Last week, I overheard her on the phone with your mother, he continued, lowering his voice further. They were discussing the seating arrangement. Your name came up. My heart thumped painfully against my ribs. What did she say? He looked uncomfortable. She said, and I'm quoting here, I don't want her anywhere visible. Put her by the coat check or something. She always finds a way to draw attention to herself, and I'm not having it on my wedding day. Despite having suspected as much, hearing the actual words knocked the wind out of me. Wow, I managed, taking a large sip of champagne to hide the tremor in my voice. Your mother suggested putting you at least at a family table toward the back, but Amelia was adamant. James ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, messing it up slightly. When I asked her about it later, she denied the whole conversation. Said I must have misheard, that they were talking about some distant cousin who had caused drama at another family event. And you believed her? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. I wanted to, he admitted, shame clouding his features. It's easier to believe the person you love than to face the possibility that they're not who you thought they were. I understood that all too well. How many times had I convinced myself that my mother's coldness was just her way, that Amelia's slights were unintentional, that the problem wasn't them, but my own sensitivity. Why are you telling me this? I asked. We're practically strangers, and you just married her a few hours ago. James looked at me directly then, his gaze intense, because I've been watching how she treats you, not just today, but at family gatherings leading up to the wedding. I've seen how she subtly puts you down, how she takes credit for your ideas, how she makes sure everyone knows she's the successful, put-together sister, while you're the one who can't quite get it right. His observations were so accurate it stung. I'd thought those dynamics were invisible to outsiders, that Amelia's manipulations were too subtle to be noticed by anyone but me. And, he continued, I'm starting to wonder if I've made a terrible mistake. If the woman I fell in love with is just a carefully crafted persona. Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance to the ballroom caught our attention. An elegant older woman in a navy blue dress was arguing with one of the security guards my sister had insisted on, hiring for the exclusive event. That's my mother, James said, looking alarmed. Eliza, she wasn't supposed to be here. What do you mean? Your mother wasn't invited to your wedding? I asked, confused. His expression darkened. She was invited, but Amelia told me yesterday that my mother had called to say she couldn't make it. Some emergency with her sister in Arizona. I'm guessing from your face that's not true? My mother doesn't have a sister, he said flatly. I called her immediately, but she didn't pick up. I left a message asking what was going on, but I never heard back. Amelia suggested her phone might be off during her flight. We watched as the security guard finally stepped aside, allowing Eliza to enter. Her face was flushed with anger as she scanned the room, presumably looking for her son. When she spotted us, she made a beeline for our table, her designer heels clicking purposefully across the marble floor. James, she said, ignoring the formality of the occasion. We need to talk. Now. He stood, placing a gentle hand on her arm. Mom, what's going on? Amelia said you couldn't make it. Amelia lied. Eliza cut him off, her voice tight with controlled fury. She told me the wedding had been postponed due to issues with the venue. I only found out it was happening today when Catherine called to ask why I wasn't in the family photos she saw posted online. I felt a chill run through me. This went beyond typical Amelia selfishness. This was calculated cruelty. I don't understand, James said, looking genuinely bewildered. Why would she do that? Eliza glanced at me, seemingly noticing my presence for the first time. I'm sorry, we haven't been introduced. This is Ava, Amelia's sister, James said. Ava, this is my mother, Eliza. Understanding dawned in her eyes. Ah, the sister. I've heard about you. Something in her tone made me think she'd heard Amelia's version of me, likely unflattering. Mom, please tell me what's going on. James pressed, pulling us back to the matter at hand. Eliza reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I was going to wait until after the honeymoon to show you these, to give you a chance at happiness before reality set in. But I can't stand by and watch you tie yourself to someone so manipulative. She pulled up a text conversation and handed the phone to James. I couldn't see the screen from where I sat, but I could see his face as he read, confusion giving way to disbelief, then shock, and finally a cold anger I wouldn't have thought possible on his kind face. What is it? I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. James handed me the phone without a word. On the screen was a text exchange between Amelia and someone saved as KM in Eliza's contacts. Who's KM? I asked. Kate Metcalf, Eliza explained. My best friend. She's been my confidant for decades. Apparently, she's also been Amelia's source of information about our family finances. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach sinking with each one. They were dated from 6 months ago, around the time James had proposed. Amelia. He finally did it. Ring is smaller than I expected, but I can upgrade later. KM. Congrats. When's the wedding? Amelia. Pushing for June. His trust fund vests on his 30th birthday in July. KM. Smart girl. What about his mother? Still an issue? Amelia. Working on it. Need to isolate him from her influence. She's suspicious of me. KM. Be careful. Eliza's no fool, Amelia. Neither am I. By the time she figures out my plan, I'll be Mrs. Whitman with access to everything. The texts continued, detailing Amelia's strategy for securing James's fortune, her plans to gradually distance him from his family, and her complaints about having to play nice with his friends. There were even messages about how she planned to handle a prenup if one was suggested, agree to it initially, then find ways to invalidate it later. My sister hadn't married for love. She'd orchestrated a calculated financial takeover. How did you get these? I asked Eliza, handing the phone back with shaking hands. Kate showed them to me yesterday, she replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. She finally realized she'd been used as a pawn in Amelia's game. Apparently, your sister has been cultivating a friendship with her for over a year, ever, since she met James at that charity gala. James was still standing frozen, his face ashen. "I need to talk to Amelia," he said finally, his voice barely audible over the music and chatter of the reception. "James, wait!" Eliza grabbed his arm. "Think about how to approach this. You need to protect yourself legally before confronting her." I found myself nodding in agreement. "Your mother's right. Amelia is skilled at turning situations to her advantage." He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. "She'll deny everything," I said, answering his unspoken thought. "She'll say the texts are fake, or that they're being misinterpreted, or that she was just venting to a friend. And she'll make you feel crazy for even questioning her." "You sound like you're speaking from experience," Eliza observed shrewdly. "Lifetime of it," I confirmed. Just then, as if summoned by our conversation, I spotted Amelia weaving through the crowd toward us, her face set in an expression of concern that I recognized as entirely performative. She had noticed her new mother-in-law's unexpected arrival. The three of us fell silent as she approached, a predator entering our midst disguised as a beautiful bride. "James, darling, there you are." Amelia's voice was honey-sweet as she approached our table, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. They widened in mock surprise when she saw Eliza. "Eliza, what a wonderful surprise. I thought you couldn't make it because of your sister's emergency." The audacity of her lie, delivered with such conviction while looking directly at the person she was lying to, was breathtaking. I'd seen this performance before. Amelia's ability to rewrite reality on the spot and make you doubt your own memories was uncanny. James stiffened beside me. "There is no sister, Amelia." A flicker of uncertainty crossed my sister's perfect features before her smile reasserted itself. "Of course there is. You told me yourself about your aunt in Arizona who—" "Stop," Eliza cut in, her voice quiet but steely. "Just stop. I don't have a sister. I never called to cancel. You told me the wedding was postponed." Amelia glanced at me, as if assessing whether I was the source of this confrontation. There must be some misunderstanding. With all the wedding stress, perhaps wires got crossed somewhere. "The only thing crossed," Eliza replied coldly, "are the lines of decency. I know everything, Amelia." "Everything about what?" Amelia laughed lightly, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the rapid assessment of how much they knew and how best to counter it. "About why you're really with my son," Eliza said, pulling out her phone. "About your plans for his trust fund. About how you've been manipulating him from the start." Amelia's face went through an impressive series of expressions: shock, hurt, confusion, and finally righteous indignation. "I don't know what you're talking about. James, honey, what is going on?" James had been unusually quiet, watching his new wife with the detached curiosity of someone observing a specimen under glass. Now he spoke, his voice unnervingly calm. "Were you ever going to tell me that you've been secretly communicating with my mother's best friend to get information about my family's finances?" "What?" "No. I mean, yes, I know Kate, but—" "Don't," James warned, holding up a hand. "We have the texts, Amelia." For the first time, I saw my sister falter. Real panic flashed in her eyes before she regained control. "What texts?" "I occasionally chat with Kate because she's important to your mother, and I wanted to build a relationship with her. Is that a crime now?" "You discussed my trust fund," James continued, his voice growing colder. "You talked about isolating me from my mother's influence. You literally mapped out how you would handle invalidating a prenup after we were married." Amelia's composure cracked further. She reached for James's hand, but he pulled away. "James, baby, you're misinterpreting things. Those texts were just me venting. You know how stressful wedding planning has been, and sometimes I say stupid things I don't mean. To my mother's best friend? Someone you barely know? Amelia was floundering now, her carefully constructed narrative beginning to unravel. She shot a venomous glance at Eliza. "This is about you not wanting your son to marry me. You've never liked me. You're trying to sabotage my wedding day." "Our wedding day," James corrected quietly. "And it's already sabotaged, don't you think?" People at nearby tables were beginning to notice the tension in our corner. I saw my mother watching from across the room, her brow furrowed in concern. My father, usually so passive in family conflicts, was making his way over to us. "What's going on?" he asked, reaching our tense little group. "Amelia, people are waiting for the first dance." "Nothing, Daddy," Amelia said quickly, her voice taking on the little girl quality she always used with our father. "Just a little misunderstanding with James's mother." My father looked at the four of us. James's stony face, Eliza's barely contained fury, my own watchful stillness, and Amelia's forced smile. For once, he didn't accept the easy explanation. "Henry," Eliza addressed my father directly, "I think you should see these." She handed him her phone, open to the damning text messages. My father skimmed through them, his normally placid expression growing troubled. He looked up at Amelia, real disappointment in his eyes for the first time I could remember. "Amelia, is this true? Did you pursue James for his money?" "Daddy, no. I love James. Those texts are being taken out of context." Amelia's voice had an edge of desperation now. "Why is everyone attacking me on my wedding day?" My mother had joined us by this point, drawn by the obvious tension. "What's happening? Henry, why do you look upset?" My father handed her the phone silently. She read quickly, her face paling slightly before she handed the phone back to Eliza with a tight smile. "I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Amelia wouldn't—" "Don't, Mom," I interrupted, finding my voice at last. "Don't make excuses for her." Not this time. My mother looked at me with genuine surprise, as if she'd forgotten I was there. "Ava, this is a family matter." "I am family," I said firmly, "even if you both treat me like I'm not." A hush had fallen over our section of the ballroom. The music continued to play, but the guests nearest to us had stopped their conversations, sensing the drama unfolding. "Perhaps we should take this somewhere private," my father suggested, glancing around uncomfortably. "Why?" I asked, standing up. Years of being silenced, of family conflicts being hidden behind closed doors, where my sister could manipulate the narrative, had reached a breaking point. "So Amelia can spin this her way? So you and Mom can help her cover up what she's done, just like you always do?" "Ava!" My mother looked scandalized. "That's enough." "No, it's not," I retorted. "It's nowhere near enough. Amelia deliberately excluded me from this wedding, placing me by the coat check like an embarrassing secret. She lied to James's mother to keep her away. She's been planning to marry James for his money from the beginning, and you two have enabled her selfishness, her entire life." My father, to my astonishment, nodded slowly. "She's right, Caroline." My mother gaped at him. "Henry, what are you saying?" "I'm saying we've favored Amelia since they were children. We've excused her behavior, praised her accomplishments while ignoring Ava's, and turned a blind eye when she was cruel to her sister." My father's voice grew stronger with each word, as if he'd been holding these thoughts inside for years. "And look what that's created. A daughter who would manipulate and deceive a good man for financial gain." I stared at my father in shock. In 30 years, I had never heard him speak so bluntly about Amelia's behavior or acknowledge the unequal treatment I'd received. "Dad," Amelia's voice quavered, tears filling her eyes on cue. "How can you say that? I love James. This is all a misunderstanding." My father turned to James, his expression grave. "Son, I owe you an apology. I should have seen this coming. I should have warned you about the person my daughter has become. That responsibility falls on me and her mother." Amelia's tears vanished, instantly, replaced by cold fury. "Oh, so now you're taking Ava's side? After all these years of supporting me, you're going to turn on me at my own wedding?" "I'm not taking sides," my father replied calmly. "I'm finally acknowledging the truth. And the truth is, we failed both of you. We failed Ava by neglecting her, and we failed you by indulging your worst impulses." The wedding planner approached, cautiously, sensing disaster. "Is everything all right? The band is waiting for the first dance." "There won't be a first dance," James said quietly, "or a reception. I think it's time we told the guests to go home." "What?" Amelia shrieked, abandoning all pretense of composure. "You can't cancel our wedding reception. The wedding's already happened," James acknowledged grimly. "But this marriage is over before it's begun." The guests closest to us were now openly staring, whispers spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. I caught snippets: fight, canceled, bride's sister, and felt a momentary pang of guilt for being part of this public spectacle. But then I looked at James's face, the devastation etched there, and knew that exposing Amelia's true nature was worth whatever social embarrassment would follow. My sister, however, wasn't going down without a fight. As the facade of the perfect bride crumbled, something darker and more familiar emerged. The Amelia I had always known existed beneath the charming exterior. "This is ridiculous!" Amelia hissed, her voice low but vibrating with barely contained rage. The perfect bride mask had slipped completely now, revealing the calculating woman beneath. "You cannot humiliate me like this in front of everyone. I won't allow it." The way she said "won't allow it" sent chills down my spine. This was Amelia in her truest form, someone who believed she controlled not just her own reality, but everyone else's as well. "It's over, Amelia," James said firmly, though his voice betrayed his own emotional turmoil. "I'll have annulment papers drawn up tomorrow." "Annulment?" she scoffed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "On what grounds?" James leaned in closer, his words meant only for our small group. "Fraud, misrepresentation. Take your pick." "You have no proof of anything," Amelia countered, her confidence returning. She glanced at Eliza's phone. "A few text messages that could mean anything. Please." "No judge would—" "I have more than texts," Eliza interrupted, her expression grim. "Kate recorded your conversations. She felt guilty about her role in your scheme and has been documenting everything for months." The color drained from Amelia's face so rapidly I thought she might faint. That's illegal. You can't record someone without their consent." "Not in New York," Eliza replied coolly. "Single-party consent is all that's required, and Kate consented." For a moment, genuine fear flickered in my sister's eyes. Then, like a cornered animal, she lashed out in the direction she thought safest, toward me. "This is your doing," she snarled, all pretense of sisterly affection gone. "You've always been jealous of me. You couldn't stand to see me happy, could you, Ava? You had to ruin the most important day of my life." "I didn't do anything," I said calmly, refusing to be baited. "I didn't even know about those texts until 10 minutes ago." "But you're loving this, aren't you?" Amelia's voice rose, drawing more attention. Poor overlooked Ava finally gets her moment. Finally gets to see big sister take a fall. Our mother tried to intervene. "Amelia, darling, please lower your voice. People are staring." "Let them stare!" Amelia shouted, officially transforming her perfect wedding into a spectacle. "Let them all see what my family really is. A father who turns on his own daughter, a mother with no backbone, and a pathetic, envious little sister who's never accomplished anything in her life." The harsh words echoed across the suddenly silent ballroom. The band had stopped playing, leaving only the sound of Amelia's ragged breathing and the uncomfortable shifting of guests who couldn't decide whether to leave or stay for the unfolding drama. James pulled something from his pocket, a small USB drive. "Kate gave this to my mother this morning. It contains recordings of phone calls where you discuss how you'll handle me after we're married, how you'll gradually take control of my finances, how you never loved me at all." Amelia lunged for the drive, but James stepped back easily. "You're lying," she spat, though uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Am I?" He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and held it up. Amelia's voice, clear and unmistakable, filled the air between us. "Of course I don't love him," recorded Amelia was saying with a laugh. "He's nice enough, and not bad-looking, but so boring. Always talking about his charitable foundation and how to help people. But 30 million makes up for a lot of boring, don't you think?" James stopped the recording, his face impassive, though his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That was from 3 weeks ago. A call to your friend Jessica, who apparently also had concerns about what you were doing." My sister stood frozen, her beautiful wedding gown suddenly looking like a costume, rather than the symbol of love and commitment it was meant to be. For once in her life, Amelia had no clever response, no manipulation to deploy. The truth of who she was stood exposed, in the harsh light of her own words. Then she did what Amelia always did when truly cornered. She created a diversion. "This is all Ava's fault," she shrieked, pointing at me accusingly. "She's turned all of you against me because she's always hated me. Tell them, Ava, tell them how you've always resented me for being more successful, more beautiful, more loved. Every—" I in the ballroom turned to me. In that moment, I had a choice. I could engage with her accusations, defend myself, try to counter her narrative with my own. That's what she wanted, to create enough chaos and doubt that she could slip away, the victim rather than the villain of this story. Instead, I simply looked at her with genuine pity. "I never hated you, Amelia. I wanted to be close to you. I wanted you to see me as a sister, not competition." "Liar," she hissed, her composure completely shattered. "You've been plotting against me for years." She turned to our parents, desperation evident in her wild gestures. "Mom, Dad, you know that's true. Ava's always been difficult, always been trouble. Tell them." My mother looked torn, her instinct to protect her favorite child warring with the undeniable evidence of that child's true nature. My father, however, simply shook his head sadly. "No, Amelia. The only person who plotted anything here was you." Amelia's face contorted with rage. She grabbed a champagne flute from a nearby table and hurled it against the wall, shattering glass, across the marble floor. "Fine. You want to believe her lies? You want to side with her over me? Go ahead. I don't need any of you." She turned to James, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "And you? You think you're canceling this reception? Calling for an annulment? I will destroy you before I let that happen." James didn't flinch. "It's over, Amelia. The harder you fight, the worse it will be for you." "You have no idea what I'm capable of," she threatened. "Actually," he replied quietly, "I think I finally do." He nodded to someone across the room, his best man, who had been filming the entire confrontation on his phone. "And now everyone else will too, if you try to contest the annulment or come after me legally." Amelia followed his gaze, seeing the recording in progress. The final piece of her carefully constructed world crumbled. Her shoulders sagged momentarily before she rallied one last time. "This isn't over," she declared to all of us, though the threat sounded hollow now. "None of you know what you've done." With that, she turned and stormed toward the exit, her elaborate train dragging behind her, no longer the triumphant bride, but a furious woman fleeing the scene of her own unmasking. An uncomfortable silence fell over the ballroom. Guests shifted awkwardly, unsure what to do now that the celebration had imploded so spectacularly. The wedding planner looked close to tears herself, her perfectly organized event in shambles. James turned to address the crowd. I apologize to everyone for this situation. Obviously, the reception is canceled. Please enjoy some food and drinks, if you wish, but understand if you'd prefer to leave. People began to gather their belongings, whispering among themselves. I knew we'd be the subject of gossip for months to come, our family's private drama now public knowledge. My mother rushed, after Amelia, unable to break the habit of a lifetime, even in the face of overwhelming evidence of her daughter's true character. My father remained, looking suddenly older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. I'm sorry, Ava, he said quietly, for everything. It was an apology 30 years in the making, and while it couldn't undo the damage of a lifetime of being overlooked, it was a start. I turned to James, who stood shell-shocked amid the ruins of what should have been the happiest day of his life. Are you okay? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not even close, but I will be. He looked at me thoughtfully. You know, for sisters, you two couldn't be more different. I didn't know how to respond to that. For so long, I had defined myself. In opposition to Amelia, if she was confident, I was unsure. If she was outgoing, I was reserved. If she was demanding, I was accommodating. Had I lost my own identity in the process of trying not to be her? These thoughts were interrupted as Amelia burst back into the ballroom, my mother trailing helplessly behind her. Her face was streaked with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, incandescent rage. You think you've won, don't you? She snarled, addressing all of us but fixing her gaze on me. You think you've exposed me? Ruined me? You have no idea what it's like to be me? To have everyone expect perfection all the time. To know that one mistake, one failure, and people like you will be circling like vultures. Her words struck a chord with me, not because I sympathized with her actions, but because I glimpsed, perhaps for the first time, the immense pressure she had lived under. Some of it external, but most of it self-imposed. The desperate need to be seen as perfect had twisted her into someone who would do anything to maintain that illusion, including destroying others. But understanding didn't equal forgiveness, and as Amelia continued her tirade, directing her venom, primarily at me, I realized it was time for a reckoning between sisters that had been brewing for 3 decades. You want to know what it's like to be me, Amelia? I asked, my voice quiet but steady. The remaining guests had formed a loose circle around us, witnesses to this final act of our family drama. I've spent my entire life knowing exactly what it's like to be you, because I've lived in the shadow of your perfection since the day I was born. Amelia scoffed, but I saw uncertainty flicker in her eyes. For once, I wasn't backing down. All those years, I thought there was something wrong with me, I continued, taking a step toward her. Something fundamentally lacking that made Mom and Dad love you more. That made you the star and me the footnote. Oh, spare me the victim's story, Amelia sneered, but her voice wavered. You've always been pathetic, Ava, always waiting for handouts, instead of making something of yourself. I smiled sadly. There it is. Your go-to defense. Attack and demean. Make others feel small so you can feel big. But it's not working anymore. Not with me. My father moved to stand beside me, a gesture of support that nearly made me falter. I'd waited so long for this moment, to be seen, to be validated. I don't hate you, Amelia, I said, and I meant it. I pity you. Because behind all that perfect makeup and designer clothing is someone so deeply insecure that she'd deceive and manipulate a good man just to feel powerful. You don't know anything about me, she hissed. I know everything about you, I countered. I've studied you my entire life, trying to figure out what made you so special, what made you deserving of all the love and attention I craved. And now, I realized there was nothing special, just a person willing to do whatever it takes to be the center of attention, no matter who gets hurt in the process. Amelia's face contorted with rage. You've turned them all against me, my own family. No, Amelia, you did that yourself. I gestured toward James and his mother. You lied to these people who wanted to love you. You manipulated them. You tried to use them, and when they discovered who you really are, they chose truth over the beautiful illusion you created. Tears spilled down my sister's cheeks, but they weren't the calculated tears she'd deployed so effectively throughout her life. These were real, bitter tears of someone watching their carefully constructed world collapse. I was never your competition, I said softly. I was just your sister, wanting to be loved. Amelia lunged at me suddenly, her hands clawing the air between us before our father stepped between us. You've ruined everything, she shrieked. No, Amelia, I replied calmly. This is the consequence of your choices, of years of manipulation and cruelty disguised as superiority. My mother finally found her voice. Amelia, please calm down. We can fix this. I turned to her, feeling a strange new strength. No, Mom. You can't fix this. You can't rewrite this story to make Amelia the victim. Not anymore. How dare you speak to me that way? My mother gasped. But there was uncertainty in her eyes. I dare because it's time for truth. You chose her over me, every single day of my life. You recorded every detail of her existence while barely acknowledging mine. And that favoritism created this. I gestured at Amelia, still struggling in our father's grip. It created someone who believes she's entitled to whatever she wants, regardless of who gets hurt. The wedding planner cleared her throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should clear the room. No, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. Let them stay. Let them see what happens when a family builds itself around a false idol. James approached, his expression grave but compassionate. Ava's right. The damage here isn't just about today. It's about patterns established long ago that none of you were willing to confront. Amelia had stopped struggling and now stood rigidly. Between our parents, her perfect wedding gown rumpled, her makeup streaked with tears. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without her armor of charm and manipulation. I never wanted this, she whispered, a final attempt to reframe the narrative. I just wanted everyone to be proud of me. No, I corrected her gently. You wanted everyone to worship you. There's a difference. For the first time in my memory, Amelia had no response, no clever deflection, no counterattack. She simply stared at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time, not as the inadequate sister she'd always dismissed, but as someone who had finally stepped into her own power. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely audible. I looked around at the destroyed reception, the uncomfortable guests, the shattered champagne glass on the marble floor, all symbols of the beautiful facade that had finally crumbled. Now, I said, we all face reality, and reality is that you're not the person you've pretended to be. The question is, who will you become once you stop pretending? Amelia's face crumpled, not in the calculated way I'd seen her manipulate emotions throughout her life, but with genuine despair. The realization that she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of the situation seemed to break something fundamental inside her. I don't know how to be anyone else, she admitted, her voice small. For a moment, I almost reached for her, a lifetime of caretaking instincts hard to overcome. But I stopped myself, knowing that rescuing her now would only perpetuate the cycle. That's something you'll have to figure out on your own, I told her. But it starts with honesty, with yourself and with others. I looked at James, who gave me a small nod of approval. Then I turned to my parents, who stood frozen in the wreckage of their golden child's downfall. I'm leaving now, I announced, Not just this wedding, but this dynamic. I'm done being the family footnote. Done measuring my worth against Amelia's. Done hoping for scraps of attention and affection. My mother's face registered shock. Ava, don't be dramatic. We can talk about this later as a family. No, Mom. There is no later for this version of our family. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it will be on new terms. Terms where I'm seen and valued as an equal, not as Amelia's less important shadow. I turned to leave, pausing briefly to address the stunned wedding guests. I apologize for the dramatics. Please help yourselves to the cake. I hear it cost more than my car. And with that, I walked out of the ballroom, past the coat check where I'd been relegated, and into the bright afternoon sunshine. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking in Amelia's shadow. I was casting my own. 6 months have passed since Amelia's wedding. So much has changed, yet when I think about that day, it feels like yesterday. The clarity I gained standing in that ballroom still guides me. I'm sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. It's smaller than my old place, but it's mine, chosen without considering what anyone else would think, decorated to please only myself. The annulment went through quickly. James sent me a brief note afterward, thanking me for my clarity and courage. We've had coffee twice since then, not in any romantic sense, but as two people who understand what it means to break free from Amelia's orbit. He's moved to Seattle to focus on his foundation's work. I think he'll be okay. Amelia disappeared to Europe after the wedding disaster. According to my father, she's staying at a villa in southern France owned by a distant cousin. She hasn't contacted me, which is both a relief and, in odd moments, a small ache. The phantom pain of a relationship that never really existed. My relationship with my parents has undergone its own transformation. My father calls weekly now, awkward attempts at conversation that nonetheless feel like genuine effort. He sent me a journal for my birthday, a beautiful leather-bound book with a note that read simply, "Your story matters." I cried when I opened it. My mother is a more complicated case. 3 decades of favoritism don't disappear overnight. She still mentions Amelia constantly, still struggles to see me clearly. But there's something different now. A hesitancy, a caution in how she speaks. To me, she knows I have boundaries now, and that I'll enforce them. We had dinner last month, just the two of us. Halfway through the meal, she put down her fork and said, "I don't know how to be your mother." The admission stunned me. "You've been my mother for 30 years, I pointed out. "No," she said, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've been Amelia's mother for 30 years. With you, I was just present. And I don't know how to fix that." "You start by seeing me," I told her. "Not as Amelia's sister, not as the daughter who needs to be fixed or improved. Just as Ava." She nodded, and though I don't think she fully understood, it was a beginning. The healing hasn't come from reconciliation as I once hoped it would. It's come from choosing myself, from setting boundaries, from walking away from patterns that diminished me, from building a life that doesn't revolve around seeking approval I was never going to get. Last week, I received a letter from a cousin who was at the wedding. She wrote about how witnessing my stand against Amelia had inspired her to confront her own toxic family dynamics. "I never knew you could just refuse to participate in the story they create about you," she wrote. Her words stayed with me, because that's exactly what I did that day at the Ritz. I refused to accept the role I'd been assigned in my family's narrative. I stepped out of the script. The strangest part of freedom is how quiet it is, without the constant background noise of trying to prove my worth, of measuring myself against my sister, of seeking validation from parents who couldn't give it. There's a stillness I'm still getting used to. Sometimes it feels like loneliness. More often it feels like peace. I've started writing again, something I abandoned years ago when Amelia mocked a short story I'd been proud of. Last month, I had a piece published in a literary magazine, a personal essay about standing in shadows and stepping into light. I didn't tell my family about it. This achievement was for me alone. As the sun disappears below the horizon, I think about that isolated table by the coat check at Amelia's wedding. At the time, it felt like the ultimate humiliation, visible proof of my place in the family hierarchy. Now I see it differently. That table was a gift, the final insult that gave me the clarity to break free. I don't know if Amelia and I will ever have a real relationship. Maybe someday, if she does the work to become someone capable of authentic connection, rather than manipulation. But my healing can't depend on her transformation. It has to come from within me. Tonight, I'm meeting friends for dinner. People who know me as just Ava, not as Amelia's sister. People who value my thoughts, who make space for my voice, who see me clearly. This is the truth I wish I could tell my younger self, standing in that ballroom with tears threatening to spill. Your worth doesn't depend on where they seat you at the table. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from walking away and building your own table, surrounded by people who celebrate rather than diminish your light. I slip my journal into my bag and lock my apartment door behind me. Outside, the evening air feels fresh with possibility. I am not defined by my sister's shadow anymore. I am not a footnote in someone else's biography. I am the author of my own story now, and these pages are waiting to be filled.